And we are live.
Okay, Sue, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is the Troy Planning Commission meeting conducted remotely by Zoom. Please call the roll.
Mr. Wolke.
Here.
Mayor Oda.
Here.
Mrs. Ehrlich.
Here.
Mr. Titterington.
Here.
Mr. Westmeyer.
Here.
Mr. Cappers.
I'm here.
Mr. McGarry.
Here.
All members are on.
Okay, we have before us by email our minutes of our last meeting of May 27th, 2020. Are there additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Support.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? They stand accepted. Okay, the first matter to come before us today is the Historic District application for 210 East Main Street roof replacement. The staff have a report.
Yes, sir. This is the same house that you heard as far as other at the previous commission. The property is 210 East Main Street. The applicants are Mitchell and Phyllis Marion. The property is zoned B3 Central Business District. The OHI form lists the properties, the property being constructed in 1847 as a two-story pre-classical house. It's a smaller home with a frame rear addition. A porch on the northwest corner was added at a later date, and several additions to the structure in 1860 and 1862. This property is not on the National Historic Registry. The applicant is requesting the approval for the replacement of the existing shingle roof of the house due to storm damages from the tornadoes of January 19th, along with, given the previous information or feedback from the Planning Commission, this does include replacement of the shingles on the garage with Owens Corning Oak Ridge Series architectural asphalt shingles in the color of aged cedar. As I mentioned, the garage will also be done. The home, they are replacing the white gutters with new white gutters, and that does include the little front porch sunroom. The gutters on the garage, which are also white, are not being replaced because they did not have any damage due to the storms. Staff does recommend approval for these proposed alterations due to their in keeping with the historic nature of the district. The style of the building product will maintain the visual relationship of the streetscape, and the alterations do not deter from any of the historical or architectural features of the property.
Commission members have any question of staff? Commission members want to take any action?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, who's going to take the second on that? Was that Sandy?
No, I think it's.
Take it. Ed.
Ed. Okay, Ed second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich.
Yes.
Mr. Titterington.
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Cappers.
Yes.
Mr. McGarry.
Yes.
Mr. Wolke.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, the next matter, the Historic District application for the demolition of a residence and a garage structure located at 126 South Cherry Street. The staff have a report.
Yes, we do. Thank you. I won't go through the entire report because the report remained the same from the last meeting. We did not add anything to the report. Just to kind of sum up some points for those attending the meeting now that didn't attend the last meeting. The City of Troy zoning code requires evidence that there's 4 criteria for a demolition to be allowed to continue. Staff has determined that 3 of the 4 have been met. Those criteria that we felt were met was a square foot cost of meeting the minimum building code would exceed the square foot market value. There's information in the package that show the repair estimates for all of these items, which do exceed the square foot cost. Another criteria is the structure is listed as non-qualifying or not consistent with other structures in the historic district. The OHI form provided by the state of Ohio states the property is not qualifying. So we felt that criteria was also met. And the last criteria was the structure is contributing and has been declared a public nuisance, and removal will not affect the historic integrity of the streetscape. We also felt that criteria was met. So staff does feel that 3 of the 4 criteria to make it eligible for demolition have been met. As stated before, there's nothing else in your packet that is new. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions of staff? Since the last meeting, we've received 135 pages of material from interested citizens on this matter. Has the Planning Commission had the opportunity to review all those? And does anybody need any additional time for their consideration? Hearing none, I'm assuming then that everybody has read the materials. I have, I know that for one. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hear from some of the interested citizens in this order. There will be a time limit for each one of these presentations. The first speaker will be a speaker for the opponent to the demolition, Mr. William McGraw. He'll have 5 minutes. Then we'll have the primary speaker for the proponents of the application. That's Attorney Jose Lopez, 5 minutes. The next speaker will be from the opponent's side, Evanthea Owen. She'll be granted 3 minutes. The secondary speaker for the proponents of the demolition will be Ann Baird. She will be 3 minutes. Next, we'll have the secondary speaker, number 2, for the opponents of the demolition, Patrick Hansford, who will have 3 minutes. And finally, the secondary speaker for the proponents of the demolition, Art Haddad, will have 3 minutes. Speakers, you will be given your allotted time. However, when you come within 1 minute of the end of your allotted time, there will be a notice given to you that you still have 1 minute left. You will be unmuted coming out of the waiting room for that period of time, but at the end of your time, you will be promptly muted again. So there is a chance that you will be cut off in midsection if you try to extend the time past that. Okay, that being understood, the first speaker today is Mr. Bill McGraw. Bill, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to address these issues, purposes and goals of the Historic District. I'd like to address deficiencies in the staff report and then your role as planning commissioners. Purpose of the Troy Historic District is defined in the ordinance: enhancement of property values, economic development, neighborhood stability, preservation and enhancement of varied architectural styles reflecting distinct phases of the city's history, preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation of historically significant buildings. Overall goal, in my view, preserve and protect. By the way, none of these were mentioned in the staff report. These purposes have to be your guide as later stated in the ordinance. Speak for a second on property values and neighborhood stability. Appraiser Rick Miller filed a report, which you've had for now, well, about a month. He indicated that it would destabilize the neighborhood, it would lose significant value, it would be a disincentive for new buyers to invest in the neighborhood. Staff also did not mention the failure to maintain ordinance, which prohibits an owner by willful action and willful neglect to provide sufficient and reasonable care and maintenance and to ensure that the structure's perpetuation and to prevent its destruction by deterioration. Nothing stated about that. It's designed to prevent the rewarding of property owners from letting a property go down and then begging for demolition approval, which is exactly what has happened. Regarding the 2 out of 4 standards, staff said they met 3. Non-qualifying, they said the phrase non-qualifying was met, although it's not defined in the Troy ordinances. Patrick Hansford, architect, will speak to the fact that this property does qualify for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Also, there's been no declaration that this property is a public nuisance. That was plucked out of the Ohio Revised Code in an obscure section, limited only to civil actions for abatement of such things as houses of prostitution, drug houses, speakeasies, and so forth. Its definition is only limited to that section. That's clearly stated in the lead-in to the section. Was that mentioned in the staff report? No. I don't think the applicant has met the 2 out of 4 standards. They have to provide clear evidence that these standards have been met. That's part of the ordinance. That answer is a loud and resounding no, they have not. You're not bound by the staff report. It's supposed to be an unbiased report of fact and the ordinances. Instead, the staff left out significant portions of the ordinance. It reached incorrect and stretching conclusions and became an advocate for the applicant. Totally improper in my view. You were given a list of properties that have been demolished in the historic district. All the properties were found not to be historically or architecturally significant, and the reuse or rescue plan for the properties after demolition were laudable, worthy public property goals. Soup kitchen, fire department, new duplex homes along the river, Hainer, all of these things. The reuse and rescue plan for this property is dirt and grass seed. The Planning Commission is required to balance the historic, architectural, and cultural value and the purposes of the section regarding the architectural features against the applicant's proof of unusual and compelling circumstances or substantial economic hardship. The unusual circumstance they cite is lead-based paint. Lead-based paint is not unusual for houses built before 1976, which constitutes the vast majority of the historic district.
1 minute warning, Mr.
McGraw. If you approve this demolition, you must find by the ordinance that this property is not historically significant and architecturally significant or otherwise worthy of preservation. If you approve, you're approving the destruction of a home that qualifies for listing on the National Historic Register. Bad precedent. You are the guardians, as planning commissioners, guardians and protectors of the integrity and future of the historic district. All right, who's going to stand up and protect the district? If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, commission members have any questions of this speaker? Mr. McGraw, thank you very much. The second speaker then would be one of the speakers for the applicant, Jose Lopez. You'll have 5 minutes, 4 minutes until you receive a warning, and then the final minute. So let's unmute Mr. Lopez.
He's got to unmute himself.
You want to say that?
Tell him to unmute.
Mr. Lopez, are you there?
Hold on a second, Al. We're trying to get him unmuted. Best laid plans and all that. I've requested, I've told him that I'm unmuting him. There you are.
I think I'm back.
You are.
Okay. Mr. Lopez, welcome.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. A little history. Prior to the time the church bought the property, they hired an inspection company to look at the property. No disclosure of lead-based paint was found. In the sales documents, the seller did not disclose that there was a presence of lead-based paint in the property. So any suggestion that these problems are caused by the church's neglect is just inaccurate. They rented the property out. A child became sick. The Ohio Department of Health became involved. They issued an order, and this is all part of the information you already have, ordered the property vacated. The Miami County Health Department in 2018 concurred in that finding, and I disagree with Mr. McGraw. At this point, the property is a public nuisance that can't be occupied. They attempted to rent it out. It's not ADA compliant. The electrical is inadequate, and other deficiencies that are revealed and the architectural report that's part of the submission that you've been provided. The state requires remediation by a state certified company. That's also in the information you have. There are approximately 15 of those in the state. The church contacted every one of them. 10 or 11 of those only remediate for properties that they own. They got one bid for the remediation of lead-based paint. The minimum, and that's Exhibit C in your packet, is $150,000. Then there are other defects which have to be cured. That's Exhibit D and E in the packet that you've been provided, along with the cost of the demolition, which is approximately $20,000 to $25,000. Exhibit H in your packet also gives the value of comparable houses in the area, and I think that's a very important part for your determination. The fact is, in the last 10 years, there have been 10 applications for the demolition of property, all of which have been approved. In fact, Mr. Capper submitted the one for Hayner, and this one should be no different. The simple fact is that the cost to repair this property so clearly exceeds its reasonable value that it would be unreasonable to expect the church to remediate and cure the problems at this property that are long-standing and, in fact, were not caused in any way by anything that the church did. The staff's report is both detailed and accurate, and it speaks very well to the assessment of the merits of why this house is not of historic merit. Now, I read Mr. Hansford's report, and I won't get to talk, but he completely misses the point. He suggests that if you apply these standards, every house built prior to 2000 or 1978 would have to be demolished. That's not a fact. The fact is this property has been identified by the Department of Health, both at the state level and the local level, and it can't be occupied unless it's remediated. The cost of remediation and curing the defects far exceeds its value. The commission delayed its ruling to permit input from the public. You've received all sorts of letters. Speakers have been chosen. The fact is, the facts concerning this property are not going to change. The cost to remediate and cure the defects at this property aren't going to change. And the simple fact is, it would be economic waste for the church to embark on a course of remediation and repair on this property.
A minute.
The church has been an outstanding community asset and citizen. I'll let Mr. Schilling, Ozzie, and Ann speak to that. Everything has a time and a season. The time and the season for this property has expired. In spite of the suggestions of contrary, the deficiencies in the property are not the result of actions or inactions of the church. As property owners, they have a constitutional right to make the best decision for the owner. They have done so. This application for demolition, like every other application submitted in the past 10 years, should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Are there any questions of this speaker? Mr. Lopez, you indicated that this house has inadequate electric.
Yes, sir.
One of the letters that we received indicated that they had the prior owner and indicated that the wiring was actually redone and the knob and wiring that was in the house was there for decoration purposes only.
That's not accurate. I think that was in a letter that Ann Baird provided, that Carol Kerber provided, but she's an error.
How do you know she's an heir?
Because it wasn't done.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of this speaker? Thank you very much. Next up would be the Evanthea Owen. You have 3 minutes. Evanthea, is she unmuted?
She is not yet. She is
Okay,
now.
I think I am now.
You are.
Okay,
I'm
Evanthea,
Evan-
you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Evanthea Owen. I live at 134 South Cherry Street, next door to the property in question. I'd be the last person on this earth to impugn the wonderful works of the First United Methodist Church. As a past board chair for Partners in Hope, I experienced their generosity. Sadly, the discussion today is not about the outreach programs that so many writers specified in their letters. It's about business. And in this regard, the best of us can make mistakes, and there have been mistakes made. Number one, purchasing an 1879 property and failing to make inspections for lead, asbestos, and radon is a bad business decision. Subsequently, renting that property, the number two, without such inspections to a young family was risky at best. Number three, ignoring the health department's request to mitigate the lead paint resulted in loss of revenue for the church. Another mistake. Number four, failing to acknowledge the historic significance of the property was remiss. And it does appear that both properties, mine and 126, meet the criteria C standards to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Number five, submitting an application containing inconsistencies in the high cost estimates leads to one to doubt leads one to doubt the veracity of those estimates, and I doubt that, and I hope you ask me questions about it. Number six, failure to justify this demolition with a rescue plan that's planting grass, future use not determined yet, is not a plan, and it really unnerves people like me who live next door to the property. And lastly, most of the ordinances pertaining to the historic overlay district have been ignored, as Mr. McGraw pointed out. The bottom line is just because the church made some poor business decisions, the historic district and I personally should not have to bear the consequences of those decisions. And I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of this speaker? Hearing none, we'll go on to the next speaker. This is the speaker for the applicant, Ann Baird. Is she unmuted?
She is not yet. She is now.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
sir.
Good
Ann?
afternoon. Board Planning
Ann,
Commission.
you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I'm Ann Baird, and I've been a member of the First United Methodist Church since we moved to Troy in 1975. Let's try 57. I have also served as a trustee of the church for several different terms, and so I'm very familiar with the church. The house at 126 South Cherry Street was purchased as part of the long-range plan of the church. It is in the historic district. However, it is not listed as a historic house. At first, it was rented out. However, we soon found out that there was lead paint and other issues that the former owner had not listed as problems with the house. We were told that we could not rent it to people as a residence unless those problems were fixed. The older homes remind me of some of our patients at Stouter. Remember, I was a nurse for many years. One in particular had 150 admissions. We fixed her up and sent her home, and then soon after that, she died of something else. So we're going to keep finding problems with the older home. This home needs lead abatement. There's asbestos, removal needed, plumbing and electrical repair, and probably other items. We know that the lead and asbestos will be less than, but close to $500,000. Money our church does not have. We attempted to rent it out as office space. However, that was not successful. So it is sat empty for several years. setting empty has caused much neglect. Our church had a fundraiser and raised
1 minute, Miss Baird.
this money was and is dedicated to fixing our roof, the church roof, some of the windows, and some other projects. Then during that time, other projects such as the water in the basement came up and extra money had to be used to fix that. Our church has been behind in our money that we send to district. Money for abatement lead paint is currently not available. I am certain that Mrs. Davis and others from the historic district would rather see a nice piece of lawn next to her property rather than a home that is in disrepair. I am asking for your vote positive for the removal of 126 South Cherry Street. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions of this speaker? Thank you very much, Mrs. Baird. Next, we'll hear from Patrick Hansford. Is he online?
He is not, he disappeared somewhere.
He's right there.
There you are, Patrick. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I've had,
Mr. Hansford, is that you?
I just tried to unmute him and he froze up.
I've asked to share my screen.
Mr. Hansford.
You have asked for it. I don't see that.
I am here.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Hold on a second, Al. Don't start the 3 minutes. Patrick, you said you've got a screen you want to share?
Yes.
Oh, he just wants to be on the screen. There he is.
No, I have screen.
I don't see.
So we have to wait.
He's requested.
Well, yeah, did you request it?
Yeah, and the host has disabled it. So Mr. Titterton needs to enable it.
I'm going to. All right, I do not have that ability. Usually when we do that, we switch the host over, which I really can't do. I apologize, but perhaps you can share can you email your stuff to us? I don't know. Huh? It's in there. Are these materials that are already in the packet, Mr. Hansford?
There's an image that should be shown publicly, yes.
Then it should be in the packet, right?
Yes, in the emails at council, the emails that the commission received.
Okay, Mr. Hansford, it's in the packet that was distributed publicly. So let's just go with that.
Mr. Hansford, you've got 3 minutes for your presentation. Please begin.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. My name is Patrick Hansford. I'm an architect with extensive experience in historic preservation. I'm on the State of Ohio's Historic Preservation Office's consultant list. I'm originally from Troy. I have 2 projects in Troy, one historic, and I'm the architect for the new Women and Children's Shelter for the Family Abuse Shelter currently under construction. My office conducted several studies of this particular application. We reviewed parking, urbanization, and finally historic preservation. I will only talk about the historic preservation aspect of our work. I provided you with my resume and the letter report on the historic preservation aspect of this application. I'll be willing to answer questions later. The 1870s manufacturing center for buggy and wagon production, the railroad had taken over as a major mode of transportation and distribution. And due to its location, the leading source of income in Troy continued to be the processing and shipping of farm produce. The city of Troy experienced a growth in population. This population growth led to an increase in construction and development. During this time, one of the predominant architectural styles was the high Victorian Italianate. Italianate is typically found in expanding towns of the Midwest. Italianate homes are Midwest in their origin and predominantly only found in the Midwest. There are 4 criteria for a building to be listed on the National Register. The house at 126 South Cherry Street is very much eligible for inclusion on the National Register. Under criteria C, which is the building embodies distinctive characteristics of a type or a period. It's one of only 7 surviving examples in Troy, and is one of a group of 4 that immediately adjacent to each other. And 126 is the only example of front gable Italianate in Troy. If I were the preservationist for Troy, I'd be immediately looking at getting the house and its siblings listed on the National Register, as they are important houses that reflect Troy's growing importance as a Midwestern manufacturing center during the 1870s.
1 minute, Mr. Hansford.
If the application were to be approved, then Planning Commission must mediate any impact on the surrounding historic properties. I speak to this as a former planning commissioner here in the city of Centerville. At this time, the applicant has not provided any detailed plans for landscaping, masonry screening walls, repairing the existing wall to public sidewalk. At a minimum today, this application should be rejected due to the lack of detailed development plans for this property, other than stating that they will plant grass. I don't think any of us would have any issue if the church was replacing 126 by expanding their building or replacing it with a new building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hansford. Any questions of this speaker?
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about the cost estimate, which is quite comical. So,
Does the commission have any statement for the speaker? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hansford. And last on the dais would be Mr. Arthur Haddad. Let's unmute Mr. Haddad.
Yeah, I'm trying. There you go. Go ahead, Art.
Thank you. Members,
Mr. Haddad, you have 3 minutes.
thank you. Members of the Troy City Planning Commission, my name is Arthur Haddad, 843 Crestview Drive, Troy, Ohio. I'm speaking in favor of the First United Methodist Church application before the commission. The acquisition of 126 South Cherry Street is consistent with the church's long-range plan. The long-range planning committee met from 1982 to 1985 to develop a long-range plan for the church. I served on that committee. The congregation was significantly involved in the process. One of the initial issues discussed was whether or not our church should remain downtown. 3 downtown denominations have chosen to relocate. The decision to remain on site was overwhelming. Several goals were developed in this plan. 2 of these are, and I quote, "All property within the church block will be purchased to facilitate growth of the church, including parking. A church activity center will be constructed adjacent to the church for housing activities designed for youth, young adults, and adults." These goals have remained unchanged. The opportunity to acquire the former Moose property, which is now First Place, was significant in implementing the plan. In keeping with our mission, First Church has been a good neighbor in serving our community in many ways. To share several examples, First Place Food Pantry.
1 minute, Mr. Haddad.
Partners in Hope was located in the church's former parsonage for $1 a year. First Place is available at no cost for activities of nonprofits and the city. A virtual market is located in First Place at no cost. Our church has adopted Kyle School in many ways. It's been said the conditions that exist at 126 South Cherry were unknown to the church at the time of acquisition. The cost to remediate is in excess of $500,000, far greater than the value of $180,000. The standards required for approval have been exceeded. Request is
Fine.
made for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. Are there any questions of this speaker? Hearing none, thank you very much. The public session of this meeting is over. As far as the commission members are concerned, we've heard from the public in a number of emails and letters, the speakers today, and over 260 pages of materials, which we've all read. I want to note that this is not an easy decision to make. I hope you all appreciate that. On one side, we have the applicant, a very well-respected and God-loving Christian congregation, of which I count many as friends. And on the other side, we have the Southwest Historic District, a district with regulations not imposed upon any other section of this community, because it was determined years ago by our city leaders that the health of the downtown and its surrounding residential areas is best served by regulating what can and cannot be done within that district. The volunteer members of this planning commission have heard your arguments and read your letters. Whatever the result of the vote in this matter, it is hoped that you keep in mind the difficulty each of us has had in making this decision. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the letters I personally received during this process. On behalf of the United Methodist Church, I received a letter from their legal counsel, Mr. Jose Lopez, asking me to recuse myself from this matter. He pointed out that I had past relationships with both sides in this matter. First, he pointed out that apparently I acted as the closing officer for the sale and purchase transaction when the church bought the property. My role in such a transaction is to prepare the documents necessary to transfer the property on one hand and the money on the other, not to look into the rationale for the purchase or question the terms and conditions of the contract between the buyer and the seller. The transaction was closed according to the agreement of the buyer and the seller. Next, he brings up a partnership I have with Mr. William McGraw. I have no such partnership. It is true that Bill and I have been business associates in the past, owning a building, practicing law, and owning a title company. When I retired over a year ago, those relationships ceased. However, I do have to disclose that I still have an equal ownership interest in 2 bicycles housed at a resort in Florida, both of which are used for personal use and not rented to the public. Earlier, I also indicated that Bill was my attorney in an estate in which I was the executor. That estate has been closed for months, and Bill and myself have been discharged of our responsibilities. That relationship has been terminated. I also received a letter from City Councilman Jeff Schilling, a member of the church. The Planning Commission had previously approved the demolition of a house on Water Street for the benefit of the Troy Hayner Cultural Center. Jeff asked about the differences in these 2 cases. The major difference, in my view, of these 2 cases is that on the West Water Street demolition, I played an active part on behalf of the applicant. I incorporated the nonprofit entity that owns the lot and instructed the executive director on who to contact for the demolition permit. However, when the time came for the Planning Commission to decide the issue of the demolition, I was not involved. I abstained from the discussion and the vote on the matter, and if my recollection is correct, I even left the meeting room when the matter came up. I recently reviewed some opinions from the Ohio Ethics Commission and believe that I do not have a conflict of interest. I have not received nor expect to receive any definite or direct benefit from my past relationship with Mr. McGraw concerning the matter before us today, nor did I participate in the Planning Commission's decision permitting the demolition of the Water Street property indicated in Mr. Schilling's letter. Now we'll receive other comments from other commission members. Anybody else want to speak? Boy, this is going to be a shorter meeting than I thought. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I have questions.
go right ahead.
You know, I'm a new member to this commission. I haven't even been here a year. A lot of this is new to me. I have read everything. I have studied everything I can study. I'm not a structural engineer. I am not a lawyer. I would like to ask the staff a question.
Go right ahead.
Do they accept all of the articles in the petition about the cost to remediate this building?
Yes, we do accept that. I know some of the staff members, myself, and one of our other zoning inspectors were at the church when some of the inspections were being completed. That way we had knowledge that it was by a certified professional And I believe in the applications, some of them are licensed as well by the state of Ohio.
Thank you. I asked the question because there have been documents submitted saying that they are inaccurate or more than some people say would cost to remediate the building. Thank you for your answer.
Any other questions or comments by the Planning Commission? Hearing none, does the Planning Commission want to take any action on this matter? Okay, if there is no action taken, the demolition permit is not approved. Mr. Titterington, can you help us out here as to what happens with the demolition application then?
I don't know. There's you typically all actions are taken in a positive manner and either voted up or down.
Sure.
So the appropriate motion, if it was to be made, would be to approve the certificate of appropriateness. I guess is the technical way of doing that.
Patrick or Al, I would make a motion to accept the demolition of the property.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to go ahead and approve the demolition request in whatever language Mr. Titterington indicated there.
Sorry.
Is there support for that motion?
I'll support the motion.
There's a motion and there's a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay.
For clarification, the motion is to allow the demolition, is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. Okay, and an affirmative vote is to permit the demolition of the structures. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Mr. Titterington,
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Cappers,
No.
Mr. McGarry,
No.
Mr. Wolke,
Yes.
Mayor Oda.
Yes.
The motion is approved. It takes 4 positive votes and it is approved, 5-2.
Okay. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all the community members who submitted their letters. Does staff have anything else to come before the commission today?
Nothing today. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.